1. For 7 years, I worked for a major internet provider in the United States. Most existing technicians were part of a union and had been for quite some time. They had an impressive array of benefits and an impressive hourly pay as well. To get around this, whenever this ISP rolled out the newer fiber-based internet, TV, and phone, they would create a new technician position for completing the installs and repairs. Since this new position wasn't covered by the union contract yet, it has to be voted on and whatnot, the ISP would get a year or two of running these guys ragged for minimal pay and benefits. I was one of those guys, hired on for less than I was making as a department manager, working retail, in order to work 50 to 60-hour weeks. Once we joined the union, it came with better benefits and pay, but some things got weird. We were an addendum in the contract that covered the old-timers, and as such, a lot of our rules weren't really specified. Honestly, it felt at times our position's benefits was used as a bargaining chip by the old guard to get what they wanted. But I guess that it isn't really what's important to the story. What is important to the story is we didn't have an official attendance policy at all. Whenever you would look up the attendance policy in the handbook, it'd tell you to see your manager for details. I finally managed to get a copy of what the manager's handbook said, and it wasn't good. Basically, it recommended using common sense when deciding attendance discipline. Our local managers interpreted this to mean advance to the next step of discipline unless it was literally illegal to do so. This led to some weird situations. One time, after a particularly long install in the southern summer running lines through an attic, I wasn't feeling too well. Definitely signs of dehydration, a headache, dizziness, wasn't thinking clearly. I called up my boss and said I needed to pack it in for the day. He hummed and hawed over it. Didn't sound happy, but after reminding him that we were constantly told safety is our responsibility, aka if something goes wrong it must have been our fault, he allowed me to return to the garage. Once I was at the garage, however, he told me that in order to not count as a complete absence, I'd need to go to the doctor and file for an FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. This was one of my first malicious compliances because in order to qualify for the FMLA, you have to miss at least 3 days. So, because they wanted to put up a stink about it, went to the doctor, gave him the paperwork, and took the next 3 days off. Turns out I was, to absolutely no shock to me, denied FMLA. Unfortunately, when they tried to write me up for attendance, I pointed out that not only did I have permission to stop working that day before returning to the garage, but I was following their instructions by filing for FMLA. They tried to say, in that case, we'll only keep the write-up on file for 90 days and then remove it if you don't have any other absences. The union rep didn't buy that one either. The write-up got torn up before we left the office. But the whole experience taught me a weird lesson about how they handled sick days and occurrences. See, we got 5 paid sick days, but they weren't excused sick days, which meant you could be fired before even using them all since management decided each absence was an instant step of discipline, regardless of reason, despite their guidelines saying to use common sense. But there was a catch. Concurrent absences only counted as one occurrence. Missed 1 day, that was 1 occurrence. Missed 5 days in a row, still only 1 occurrence. Even if it was separated by a scheduled day off. It was the one rule that was specified in the manager guidelines. You can bet I sure as hell shared that information with all the other technicians. If you were out a single day due to illness, you might as well take an entire week off with pay, because you'll never get to use that time otherwise. The managers hated me for it. But I was bitter over the whole FMLA thing, and would share that info every single time it came up. They threatened to write me up for insubordination, but I'd just tell them that we could discuss it in the presence of my union. After all I was doing was sharing information on the attendance policy. The same policy that they used to screw us every chance they got. 2. So this is from over a decade ago. But it is the only time I've ever quit a job. I thought y'all might enjoy it. I worked for Target on their overnight team, 10 p.m. to 6:30 a.m., and eventually a specialist position came up, for which I applied and was granted. This was the position of receiver, scheduled to work 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. which basically was the person who would take in vendor orders, i.e. not things that were sent straight from corporate, but instead the Coca-Cola guy or the Lay's potato chip guy, etc. And specialty orders that came in at times other than the main truck. This was a job where instead of one major task you dealt with about 20 minor ones throughout the day, and your day varied based on the whims of the people who are bringing things into you. We had a delivery cutoff of 12 p.m., but management would always just say, take things no matter when they came. I generally was really good about managing my time, and making sure if I needed to stay late for something important I did. And if it was something minor, say the Harlequin romance books that could wait overnight to process, I'd get it first thing in the morning. I had a good rapport with my boss, and I got great reviews. Then my boss got a promotion, and my new boss was a piece of shit. The new boss, we'll call him John because that was his name. Fuck you, John. Was a tyrant of the pettiest type. He'd wonder why things were left overnight when I wasn't busy earlier in the day when he saw me, because I had completed all my tasks and I can't make UPS come faster than they do. When Target's corporate told my department it was busy enough for a 20-hour-a-week worker, he refused to let me get anyone for longer than my 30-minute lunch breaks. The straw that broke my back was P-Fresh. For those that didn't work at Target in the early 2000s, P-Fresh was what they called their new initiative to have groceries in the stores. It was a big deal for them, and my store was one of the pilot stores in our area. I would be the first person to have to deal with it, and then I would have to teach receivers in the area how it works by having them shadow me for a day at my store, and me at theirs when they got their fresh food. The fresh food came in a separate truck that arrived at 4 a.m. I expected, like I was informed, I would simply have to process it first thing in the morning when I got to work. Instead, John decided that my schedule was going to be changed to 4 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Getting up at 3 a.m. to be at work at 4 a.m. was not fun, but I dealt with it because I was a team player. However, John still insisted I needed all of my work done by the time I left at 12:30 p.m. An impossibility when the cutoff for deliveries was 12 p.m. I'm still prioritizing things as good as I could, and nothing urgent was left undone for more than 24 hours, when Target was pretty good at making sure we had plenty of time to receive things before they had to hit the floor for street dates and such. So, the straw that broke my back was when the specialist position was terminated. Basically, Target wanted those special positions in the normal chain of command, which is fine. However, when they did this, they also gave lots of power to John. You see, it was in my old position that I had weekends off, because people don't deliver on the weekends, and was not required to work holidays along with being guaranteed 40-hour-a-week Monday to Friday position. When this change came through, HR informed us we had a week to decide whether we wanted the position, or if we wanted to go to another position in the company, or if we wanted severance. HR informed me nothing would really be changing with my job, because it was still important, whereas other jobs like the jewelry counter weren't considered as important, and were being rolled in with other things. I was going to stay with the position until John brought me into the office later that day. He told me he was tired of my poor attitude involving getting things done, so he was changing my schedule to a split shift. Basically, he wanted me to come in from 4 to 5 a.m., then go home for an hour, then come back at 6 a.m. and work until 1:30 p.m. He also told me that any overtime would no longer be allowed, and that I'd have to start working 1 weekend a month in holidays. He also wrote me up for something I did not do, but the person who covered my lunches did, under the guise of me not training them properly. His words were, "You need to think long and hard about how you're working, and think about if you want to be employed here in a month." I told him he was absolutely right. I told him I would be right back. I had to run to the restroom. Instead, I went to HR and told them I'm taking the severance. And as it was 12:25 p.m., I'm guessing this is my last day. I then got to go back to John and tell him what I just said. He told me that I had to come back next week to train my replacement. I walked out of that building happier than I had been in the last 3 years working there. I got texts over the next few months of the fallout. The receiving department was a fucking nightmare for months. And since I was the only one who knew how to handle their refrigerated trucks, They lost an entire truck worth of merchandise that week. That was not a good look for them. Additionally, corporate had to send out people from out of the area to cover all of the training I was supposed to provide, which cost them a lot of money and made corporate even more pissed at John. Last I heard, he had been let go, and the next place he worked fired him for sexual harassment. I had a month's vacation where I got totally prepared for WoW Cataclysm, and then I took a new job. I was happy as a clam. 3. I used to be a sales manager for a B2B services company. We provided a service to business. Unlike a lot of companies, we would not auto-renew a client's service unless they signed a new contract. The contracts were generally for 1 to 3 years. All our contracts were signed on an iPad that recorded the GPS coordinates of where the document was signed, and we emailed the client a copy of the agreement instantly. And in the mail we basically said, if you disagree with this contract or would like to make changes, contact us within 5 business days. If you don't, we will move forward and bill accordingly. In addition, one of the cancellation terms in the contract was dishonesty. If the client could prove we were dishonest, they had a right to cancel without penalty. If the client acted dishonestly, we had the right to cancel their contract with us. There was a client that was actually quite a small account, but always proved to cause a lot of headaches for my reps. I remember calling the rep and going over the common issues I've seen with this client, and I stressed, get the signature on the iPad in his office. I also stressed that if the client wanted to cancel, let him cancel, because he's been proven to be very difficult to work with. Salesman went to the sales call, signature was signed, client service was executed according to the terms of the contract. 4 months later, I get an email from a customer service rep. The client is claiming that my salesman forged the client's signature. I did my due diligence before calling the client. I checked where the newest contract was signed. It was signed in the client's place of business via the iPad. I compared the signature on the newest contract to the many signatures on the numerous contracts we had on file with the same signer from the client. They were all very close. I also looked at the email that we sent to the client right after the contract was signed. The client opened the link to see his contract 65 minutes after the contract was signed and did nothing. Also, the link was open for several minutes. I looked up the client's current billing status. He was 45 days behind. He knew we didn't start charging late fees until 60 days behind, and at 120 days, we would begin litigation and collection account status. I called up the client, and this is how the call went. Hello, this is Luther from ABC. I was told you're accusing my sales rep of forging your signature on the renewal.
Yes, I never agreed to pay that much. I never would have. I told him to give me a discount and I wanted to see it in writing before I signed.
And did he give you a discount and show it to you in writing?
No, he said he had to go talk with his boss and I never heard back from him.
Okay, and then what happened?
Well, y'all kept up the service and I noticed on my billing it hadn't gone down but up in cost. And I looked back in my emails and saw the sales rep forged my signature, and that's illegal.
Yes, you are right. If the salesperson did forge your signature, that is illegal.
Well, good to see that we agree on that.
After the contract was signed, regardless if the signature was forged or not, you would have gotten an email with a link to the contract asking you to verify that everything is correct. And if it's not, let us know within 5 business days. Did you get the email? If you did get the email, did you review the contract?
Well, yes, but I was pretty busy and didn't open the email until recently.
I totally get it. We are busy nowadays, so assuming he did forge the signature, what would you consider an acceptable resolution to this? Would you want to end service with no penalty? Would you like a discount?
I would want a discount.
And what would you consider an acceptable discount?
3 months of free service.
Got it. Well, Mr. Client, I got several problems with your claim that my sales rep forged your signature, and before I fire this salesperson for forgery and offer you a discount, I'd like to see if we can't address those problems.
Sounds fair.
The signature was captured on our iPads, which records the GPS coordinates of where the signature happened. Pair the GPS coordinates, It happened inside your place of business.
Well, he knows that, right?
Yes, he did.
That just means he forged it inside my building.
Okay. Well, the next issue is that the signature on the renewal contract looks exactly like the previous contracts.
He just copied my signature. I know I didn't sign that.
Could it be possible someone else in your company signed it?
No, everyone here knows I'm the only one that gets to sign those contracts.
I understand. The next issue I have with your claim is that the link to the contract that was emailed to you was opened 65 minutes after the contract was signed.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, sir, it was. The reason why we have you click a link to view the signed contract is so we know if you opened the link or not. Not only that, it appears like the link was open for several minutes, which to me would indicate the person who opened that link reviewed the contract. Also, the fact that no one ever responded to the email would indicate to me the person who reviewed the contract was fine.
Are you accusing me of lying?
Yes, and because of that I will be cancelling your service with us effective immediately. How would you like to pay your current balance?
You're canceling my service and want me to pay?
Yes, I want you to pay for the services we provided.
I'm not going to pay.
If you're not going to pay for the services we provided, I'm going to refer you to our collections department, and they will add late fees, and if you don't pay them, they will refer you to our law firm for litigation.
We have a contract. You can't just cancel my service.
Actually, I can. Since I have good reason to believe you're lying about the accusation that my salesperson forged your signature, everything I have says you signed it. Our contract states that we can cancel your contract for being dishonest, and that's what we're going to do.
Fuck you!
He hangs up. I referred the client to collections. He eventually paid them without us having to sue him. Honestly, we probably would have just sold his debt to a collection agency, due to the dollar amount not being high enough to be worth it to sue. 4. Before I can explain exactly what I did, I have to explain the system that was being used. I was a stalker at an office supplies store, and every morning we received a computer-generated list of items that needed to be taken out of storage and put on the shelf. This list was generated by scanning 1. The number of a particular item that should be on the shelf, and 2. The amount of that item that we have in stock versus the amount in storage. So if 10 should fit on the shelf and our system says we have 15 in stock with 10 in storage, the list would print saying I needed to put 5 out. There's 2 very important things to note with this system. The first is that the only way the system had of grading our completion was by detecting if an item was deleted from the storage inventory. The second is that each store was graded on how closely they followed the list, by percentage. If the list said 50 items needed to go out, and we managed to get 40 out, we got 80%. Corporate expected 90% compliance daily, so I'd hear from my manager if we didn't hit that. Now comes the fun part. To start in a twist that was 100% unrelated to this issue, I had just put in my 2 weeks' notice, so I had nothing to lose. Immediately after that, about a month before back-to-school season began, corporate screwed up and registered that all of our back-to-school displays were already out. We hadn't even received these displays or any information about them because it was so early. There was no way they could be out. Suddenly, the system thought we had thousands of extra displays for school supplies like pencils and binders. We had already received all of that product and it was sitting in storage. So now that the system issue said we had displays, the fill list said they needed filled. I explained to my storage manager what happened, and she said there's absolutely no way corporate would make that mistake. I must be doing something wrong. I called local stores and spoke with their store managers. All agreed with me and said their compliance percentages are plummeting. Told my store manager, she repeated the same line. I printed off a list of the extremely low compliance percentages in our district and showed it to my manager. She said they must be doing something wrong too. Finally, I had had enough of her whining. So for my last 10 days or so there, whenever this list printed saying we needed to fill several hundred items for storage, I just deleted those items from storage. On my second to last day, my store manager gave me a hearty congratulations in solving the issue, and told me how much better we're doing than all the other stores. By the time the displays came out for real, I was gone. I was told by my former co-workers that the store was absolute chaos, because a few thousand items just didn't exist in our system, and they had to completely go through the entire store's inventory to get it all fixed. Several years later, I still find it hilarious how proud my manager was that I had solved the issue. 5. I worked at a company that gave out exorbitant amounts of vacation. Anyone who worked there for 25 plus years received 8 weeks of vacation and 2 weeks of personal time. This was a family-owned company, but rather large. We ran 3 shifts totaling 250 plus people. Enter Jimmy. Jimmy was a grizzled old man. He started at the company when he was just 20, now he was 63, and gave absolutely zero shits. Jimmy also knew how to make a specific part for our product, him and one other higher up in the office. One day, the plant owner comes out and announces he's selling to a corporation. He's older and ready to retire. He promises that there will be very little change and wishes us well. The new company comes in and immediately goes after many of the great benefits we had. The first thing they do is cut everyone's max vacation down to 4 weeks, and do completely away with personal time. Anyone who's maxed out had until December 31st of that year to use it up. And they wouldn't pay it out. They then go into the office and clean house, firing anyone who's close to retirement, including Jimmy's backup. But they also do away with one very important rule. You no longer have to get vacation approved. You can just call in and take it. Jimmy is pissed, and they know it. They realize he's the only one in the building that can do his job now, so they hire a new kid for him to train, most likely to permanently replace Jimmy. So Jimmy does what anyone would do. He calls in the first training day for the new hire, and lets us know he's going to use all of his PTO at once, and promptly takes 10 weeks off. We had a backstock of parts he had made, so it wasn't too unnerving. But for 10 weeks, Jimmy went and applied to other jobs, found one, and started. Fast forward 10 weeks. It's the day Jimmy is supposed to return. He doesn't. For 2 days they try calling him, and even go to his house. He's nowhere to be found. Finally, on day 3 he calls and resigns, and they lose their shit. The parts he makes are specialized and patented by the original founder. You can't just hire someone off the street to make them. What eventually happened was they had to contact the original owner to come in to teach some new hires how to make them. And when he found out what all they had done, it pissed him off. The last I heard, he charged them a 7-figure contract to teach them how to produce the parts, and they had to pony up, or close down. Moral of the story, don't fuck with people's vacation time. Jimmy made an electronic control module that was sealed and stayed fixed into a board unit made of 2-part epoxy. And for anyone wondering, Jimmy didn't exactly miss out on a 7-figure contract, and had zero chance to take one. He left, said fuck him, and moved on. When they contacted the previous owner and explained the situation, it was basically a, "You need my help? It'll cost 1 million" type of conversation. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 80. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you liked the video, then please do boop the like button. This can be done with the assistance of a falling asteroid. If one is not available, then you can click it with your mouse or possibly boop it with your finger. Comments and subscriptions are also very, very good. Okay, let's see, where are we? This is Monday's video. Almost at the end of May. Time is certainly wishing by, isn't it? Probably have to start thinking about Christmas shopping soon. And I know, bad words. Okay, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.